Okay, so maybe I should start here. All right, so thanks for joining us today. As you know, we are going to talk today about the access rights on Odoo. Simply put, we wanted to discuss this because we know that we have a lot of demand regarding the access right, and at the moment, we don't have yet some information on our e-learning platform. So it was maybe an idea to organize it just for this, and maybe to leave you some space after the conversation here to ask a few questions. So mainly, I won't be spending a lot of time on slides or whatever. I prepared a few just for the occasion. So here it is, just to show you what we are going to do now. It's basically having a look at the concepts and an introductory level, I would say. What is important is the following: that we are going to have a look at the users and the group definition, what it means, how you can configure that, or you can create a few new ones. I think that's quite easy. Then we'll have a look at the filters and the domains. I think it's important because that notion of filters and domains is something that people don't realize is used a lot inside Odoo, and so I think it's wise to have a look at that first before we dive into the access rights and the rules inside Odoo, which is really the core of how we are going to manage who can see what. And this is based mainly, well, a lot for the rules, for example, on the notion of domain that we cover in the second element. And then we are going to see how these things are basically imported. How is it that by default in Odoo we always have at least some access rights? And then what we are going to do also is discuss a few other items about multi-company, about let's say what are the specifics for the super users in V12 and V11, because there have been some changes here. And then we'll discuss maybe a few, well, I'll try to answer a few of your questions. So let's go. Most of the thing will be, of course, directly inside Odoo. So that's why here I will quickly jump into my Odoo test instance. And I will show you first, well, how you can have a look at the groups. It's here, right in the settings. You have the groups and the users. Maybe one first thing that I need to tell you is that at the moment I'm running in debug mode. So I will remove that so that you can see maybe it's really introductory here and you don't know exactly how you can access debug mode. It's really for beginners, let's say. So in the settings here, you have activate the developer mode, of course. There you will find lots of information in the technical settings. So I will remain during this conversation, during the webinar, a lot in the debug mode. And here you have lots of things about the security. I will come to this later. But what is really important is, at first, for the introduction, is the notion of users and groups. And that you find it here. And if you have a look at the users at the moment, it's quite simple. I don't have that many. I have just my user at the moment here, and I have a fake user that is right there, and with which I connected on this one. You see here I'm connected with that person. It's another email address I use for testing purposes and demos like this one. So what is important to understand is that at the moment I'm really logged with that user, and if I have a look at the user itself, so at my record, if you like, as a user, I can see a few things that are related to the access rights. I will come back to the notion of multi-company later, just to let you know, if you cannot see it right away on your screen when you are having a look at this video later, it may be because you didn't check here the multi-company setting, because this is a field that is shown only for that purpose, but we'll discover that later. I want first to have a look at really what is important here, the notion of group in what we call application accesses. So you can see that here at the moment, if I reopen this and I will go in my splash screen. Let's wait a bit. Yep, here you see I have quite a few applications installed, so that's why all those applications create application accesses here. But you see that it's not exactly what we call a group. A group is part of those application accesses. Just to give you an example, we have here in the sales groups, we have a notion of user here, manager here, and then I created a new group for another demo that is called estimates approver, but it doesn't exist by default in Odoo. But this is really important. Here, when we talk about groups, we are talking about what we have here. And in the documents management, we have user manager. Here we have C subscription, manage subscriptions. And you see that usually Odoo revolves around something like between 2 to 3 different groups per application. And those groups, when you click here, let's say you're on purchase, you are a user, you don't see what it is. You don't know exactly what it allows you to do. You don't see what is inside. But we are going to cover that today. But the first thing that you need to know is that when you are going to configure a new user, let's say you welcome somebody new in your company, you want to say this person is a sales manager. That's why you would go for at least the basic settings inside Odoo. Then, what is really important is that those items that we have here, those groups inside the application accesses, are available right here inside groups. So just to let you know, let's have a look at the ones that we have in the sales application. If I go here, groups, okay, I bypass this, I type sales. Here are my manager, my all documents, own documents only, and I guess I have another one. Yeah, here, estimates approver. So those are really groups I was talking about. And what's important is that the configuration that I will have for the access right is mainly based on those groups. So that's really important. It's not directly between the user and the access right that you are going to configure something. You go through groups. As you have this, I think on Windows, on or Linux, it's working on the same set of rules where you have access rights. We'll come back to this later. And here, what you can see on my screen is that, of course, I have the same information, but just shown in a different way. And here I see all the people that are part of the sales group user all documents, while when I was on my Antoine user, I could see the opposite and see that Antoine is part of that group as well. So you guessed it, it's exactly the mirror view of the information I had before. And so you will see, you are able to see who is part of which group by going here. And what is really interesting first, before we dive into the notion of domains and filters, what is really interesting is that when you go, for example, on this group, like sales manager, you will discover also that you have a notion of inheritance. And here you see that once you are a sales manager, you inherit from a few particular groups, like here the fact that you are also a sales user having access to all documents, and that you are also a restricted editor on the website application if you have the website application installed. What is important when we show this is that you will see that the inheritance, sometimes you don't pay too much attention to it, but it's really important because it shows that here now, once you are a sales manager, you also have to take into account that you have access rights that are given through those groups. And that's why you have, when I go back to the user view this time, that's why you have here, under my name, you have that notion of sales here with a first group, then the group inheriting from the first group, and a second group inheriting for the second group, a third group inheriting from the second group, and so on so forth. So that's why I would say you have here different groups, and that every time you go to the next level, you inherit from the previous access right that you had before. At least that's what you come up with when you have a standard Odoo installation. Of course, the notion of the goal of this meeting today is to show you a bit how you can configure that and how you can change it. So that was the introduction about the users and the groups and where you can find it and configure it. Now there is something else that is really interesting is when you want to configure the groups is how you are going to change the domains and the filters. And that notion, I think it's a bit technical, but it's always better to have a look at another thing regarding the filters and the domain, because maybe in the access right it's a bit technical, while it's really a simple concept. The notion of filter, you use it all the time. You use it all the time because when you go in the CRM, for example, you have here by default a filter that is given. You see the small icon of filter, you have the filters here, and you can create your own. So let's say here I'm interested at about the ones that are that contain the tag. Here I have services, so I can type services. Boom, and then I have my filter that is taken into account. What is really great with that notion is that here we make it so that it is user-friendly. You type a few things, you then select the field on which you'd like to filter, and you don't think about what is happening behind the curtains. You just want to have it working. What is really important is that when you are going to create a favorite filter, or when you have a look at those filters that already exist here, they are saved somewhere in the database. And I want to show you that because you will see then how it looks like when we have a look at the record contained in the database. It will help you understand how the access rights work later. So let's save this one, and I will say my webinar group. Let's do it like that. Let's save this. And so here you see I created a new favorite one. By the way, if I go back to my pipeline here, I can reselect it again. Excellent. So it means that if I have something selected, so if I shut down my computer, I come back tomorrow, I reopen Odoo, of course I will still be able to have access to this filter. So it means that it's saved somewhere. And of course it's saved in our database, and the information that I would like you to know, if you don't know it already, is contained right here, well, under the user-defined filters. Here. Where is it? Yes, under user interface, user-defined filters. You know that you can access this right away from here. If you type filters, it will have been better and faster, of course. And then you have access to all the filters that are already saved in Odoo. And you see there are a few. If I look for my, what was the name again? I think it was, yeah, it contains webinar. So here it is. And you have the filter name, the name under which I saved my filter. You have the model, the concept on which I made the filter. It was on the leads view. So this is related to the lead and the opportunity. And the user is myself. Is it a filter that I want to apply by default? You saw that it wasn't the case. I had to select it. Then you have the action, so it was on the pipeline. And what is really important here is the notion of domain that you cannot see this anymore, but let's go here. You have the syntax, and you have the way Odoo will, the way you have to pass the information to Odoo for it to understand that in fact you want to have a look at all the leads that are your leads and that contain the tag services. And you see that here you have a description saying, in fact, the way I had a look at my filter, so let's go back on my CRM. Let's select again this one. You remember my filter was saying I want to see only my own opportunities and leads and the one that contain the services tag. And it is translated to this domain, which means, okay, the user ID should be a UID, which identifies, it's a short word for saying the current user, so myself. And then I'm saying the tags should contain services. I don't want you to spend too much time trying to analyze this. We'll have a look at a few other examples in the rules. But the thing that you need to know is that every time you create filters like this, there is a domain that is associated. And domains are really powerful, and that are always used in Odoo in many different places. If you go into the code, if you go on github.com, you will find in lots of different Python files or XML files some domains that we load by default or that we use for selecting or at least filtering the information that we need. So a nice thing that came up, I think 1 or 2 versions ago, is that now we have kind of a domain builder, if you like. We have this information here, and you see that the domain we have is by clicking on the report. We can click here on 2 records, we'll see the records. But I see here we cannot build it, but I think maybe on the email marketing application we have it. We have something like that, if I remember well. Yeah, and that's where you have that notion of filter as well, where you can create here on your new filter and select the field on which you would like to filter. And it's the same principle. Let's say here I want to select all the ones that have city contains Brussels. Here it's not contains, this is Brussels, but if I want contain, here's what it is giving me. So again, you see that here it's the human way of doing it. And here you have the non-human, or I would say developer. No joke, it's the same thing. And so we can say here city, I like Brussels, means we will have access to all the cities that contains Brussels. And this is only available because I'm in debug mode. So keep in mind that this, you won't see it usually. We don't want to bother people using Odoo to show those kind of technical stuff. We only show that part usually. Okay, so this is to convince you how and to show you how we are going to build the domains. Then let's go back to the main reason why I'm showing this. It is because simply we are going to need this if we want to better understand the access right in Odoo. And so let's go and have a look at the groups now. I made a kind of a visit around the filters and the domain, and now we are going to see why it is useful. Let's have a look at the groups. If you remember, I introduced you to the concept of users and groups, but then inside the groups, we had a look at the notion of sales groups here, and I would like to have a look at the first level of the sales application in terms of groups. This is the one, and we see that we have 2 users inside. And I told you we just had a look at the users and the inherited notions of those groups. But you see that there are many other tabs here. And the most important of which are, to me, I will come back to the menus after, are the access right here and the record rules. You see that in the record rules you already have the notion of domain. But I will come to this later because it's a bit more tricky than simply the access rights. So if we want to understand the access right, it's quite simple. We are going to say inside Odoo, when you are connected as a user, you are linked as a user to different groups. Among these groups, I have here for one of my users, this one, which was, so Henry here. I go back here. This is Henry. Okay, you see I don't have access to all the applications. And Henry, who is part of this group, thanks to the group is a part of, it has some access rights that are given to him. And those access rights usually are quite simple. It's the first level of giving access or not to some concepts in Odoo. And you have the list here showing all those accesses. And you see that first we have a name, but the name is not that much important because usually it don't explain that much what it is. It's just for us to have a kind of a code or a codification of how we can find back the right access right. But what is really important are the following columns, which is first the object, so the concept on which I would like to apply one access right, and then the notion of read, write, create, and delete access. And here the notion of object, I think that sometimes it's a bit blurry, you don't know what it is, but the concept, the object here is really the concept or the kind of records you are going to have a look at. So let's give you an example. When I go into the sales application, I'm here on a quotation. You see quotation here, but it's not exactly the name, the technical name we give to that concept. The technical name can be seen here in the URL. You see that here it's a sale order, well, or it's a list of sale orders. So when we speak about model here, it's the same notion of object that we have here. And so sale order here is really the technical name, even though we name it quotation. But if I go then in the orders, you see, oh, it's a different thing because now I see more of it, but it's still the same model, which is sale order. And that sale order object is in fact what we have here, the objects sale order. All right, so it means that when connected with someone that is part of that group own documents only, what about the sale orders? I can see that I can read sale orders. Let's check. Yeah, indeed, I can at least read a few sale orders, so it seems correct. I can write on some sale orders. I can create some sale orders. Okay, I cannot delete it. Fine, let's try this. I'm not sure it will work because maybe I have not other associated accesses. Let's try to do this. And oh yeah, I see I don't even have the delete button. So it seems to be working. So if I want to grant him the access to delete, I will need to change this. Let's try. Okay, I need to change this. Okay, saved, and then I'm back on my user and I'm refreshing the screen so that I can see if now I have access to it. Action, okay, I got the delete button. So excellent, it seems to work. So let's go back. I would like to go back and say, no, in fact, you are just a Lambda user. I don't want you to make any mistake deleting items like these ones. So let's say I cannot do it, but you get my point. In fact, those access rights are given per object. So maybe here, as I'm a person working in the sales department, I cannot do that much things on the sale orders, but maybe for other things like leads or I don't know, stock move, maybe I have more impact. And that is what you are going to choose as some business analyst or even developer. You want to give more access or restrict some access. It's something that you are going to work with your client in order to better configure the access rights so that the users, the final users, won't make any mistake or won't try to trick the system because you kind of secured the access rights. So that's really important. That's the first level, in fact, because then when you show this, you would be able to say, okay, so I got it. My Henry Keegan, he can create a sale order. I see it, but he can write also on a sale order. So technically, what I have here is the fact that maybe my Henry Keegan could connect and write on a sale order that is not his property, because at the moment I didn't tell you about anything else than access right per model or per object. We are going to say just here, object sale order, I can write. Okay, it means I can write anything. Let's have a look. And let's try to change some information here. And let's try to say, in fact, here I'm saying it's an information tag. Okay, I got an error. It's telling me, hey, the requested operation cannot be completed due to security reason. Please contact your system admin. And then it's telling me what is going wrong. And here it's really important. It will tell you, it's kind of a debug. It will tell you why you cannot access it. And here it's telling me the problem is that you are trying to write or to update information on a sale order. That's the output of this message box. It's clearly stating it's an access error. So apparently I cannot right on the sale order. But if I go back here, I see a sale order, right. I should be entitled to write on a sale order. That's right in a way, but it's not completely right, because on top of the access rights, which give you a basic access in read, write, create, and delete on objects, then you can add a second layer. And that second layer is very, very, very important. It's the record rules that you have just next to it, and that is here. And on those record rules, you are going to refine a bit what you said earlier in the access rights. I'm going here to say, for example, on the sale orders, let's have a look at where are the sale orders. Yeah, here. In fact, I have something where the name is set is saying personal orders. So apparently on the object sale order, I can only touch or do something with my personal orders. And of course, Odoo is very smart. It's a super nice software, but personal order is just a name. It doesn't get it. So that's why we have to put some information, and the information we put it usually under a technical function. Here it's just a technical way of saying it. You remember, it's the domain, so it's kind of a filter. So here, if I have a look at my personal order, I can click to have it just in one, instead of one line, I have it in a form view. I see that in fact the definition of a personal order for a sale order, again, for every time I try to read, create, write, or delete, I see that in fact I have to also always follow that particular rule. And it's saying the user that is linked to the sale order should be my user, it's the same as UID just before, or the user should be false. And how do I know it is a or and not an and? That's because of the pipe that is here. So it's just a matter of syntax, but you will get there quite quickly. It's not that much complicated. You have or and ands, and then you group the different elements on which you would like to make your rule be applied on. And there, if I have to read it as a human, it's saying, in fact, personal orders, we get it, but if I want to transmit this to Odoo, it's saying, in fact, a personal order on a sale order means you have to be the user mentioned on the order, or you have to be, well, there needs to be no user linked to the sale order. So let's try this with the same rule. Let's go back with this person on which this rule applied. So if I remove the salesperson now, it seems like I have something else. Let's try it on another one. Maybe there's another rule. Yeah, it was already salesperson Antoine. So let's go back on another one where I'm the salesperson. I see that all of those are linked to another person than myself, so I cannot. But let's try to create one. Think, okay, that's a customer. Let's save it that way. Okay, creating I can. Before that, I wasn't able to write. So to do what I'm going to do next is, once the sale order is created, assign something different and modify it. And now you see that I can go there and I can save something, and I can you can see modify it. So now compared to what I had before, this is evaluated, we will say evaluated as true. So this rule is true, so I have access to it, and that is super important. Let's have a look at another example. Let's imagine I told you it's impossible to link it to somebody else, because then it would mean that I go against the rule, because here that notion means that this definition, this domain is not true anymore. If I try to save this, it's going to give me an error and I won't be able to go further. So if I want to get rid of that, there are ways to do it. A bad way would be to go and edit here and to say, okay, I would like to change this, and you remove it, but that's not how we work. We would prefer that you create another access right, or that you change it slightly, because every time you do something like this, it will have an impact on maybe not only one user, but several users, and there are ways you can change this. And every time you have to make a change like this one, and we want to change a domain, please, please, please always test your changes. That's very, very, very important. So let's go back here on my salesperson, Henry, and then that's why here inside my CRM, for example, I won't have access to the facts, to the other leads, in order to write on the other leads, to maybe steal other leads from other people. So that's why it is done that way, and that we provide those access right by default, because as you can see, we had an exercise right now on the sale orders, but it's not only about the sale orders. We have the same kind of rule on the opportunities. We have the same kind of rules on some subscription analysis, on the sale order reports that I don't see. For example, when I'm part of that group, I don't see the sales of other people. So that's really important. What is hard, though, is hard, if I may say it like that, is that you have to get to know two things. You have to get to know, and that's really important, you have to get to know the domain, what it is, what it means, what is a domain. But that once you know a bit Odoo, it's quite easy. And then you have to know what is inside. And here, user underscore ID. How could you know it was user underscore ID? You don't know it by default. You know it because you have experience. You know it because you read the documentation. You know it because you read the code. But otherwise, how can you know? There is a way, of course, to know it. It's to be in debug mode and to have a look at the documents on which we'd like to work. So let's go back on my pipeline. Here you see I'm still in debug mode. I will have a look at my item here. And every time, in fact, you hover a field like this one, you see that you have a field name. There's the first bullet point here where you see field partner underscore ID and the objects. And so that information should help you building your correct rules for your groups. And here, that's the field we are basing our rules on, which is, as you can see, user underscore ID field. So if you wanted to make a field on something really specific, let's say on the emails, for example, and you say, I would like someone to take his time only on the leads coming from an email address that is coming from Google, I would need to make a filter on email underscore from, a filter, so a domain, and then say it has to contain at gmail.com. And how can you do that? You can do that quite simply right here. So personal orders, you can edit the filter and change it here. But if you're not sure about the syntax, what you could be doing is maybe going into, as we said before, into some applications like the email marketing. There are other ways, other places in Odoo where you can do that. But that's one of the examples. You can create here a filter on the object here, lead opportunity, and create your filter and say, okay, if I want to have a look at only the emails, let's have a look at that. Email contains at gmail.com. That's how it looks like, and I could be reusing just this one directly inside my code here and say, okay, that's how it should look like. And doing this, maybe I should put single quotes here. And doing this, I will try it with you. Maybe there's an error, in which case I will present you my sincere apologies. Let's try it like this. Let's save. And now let's see if instead of having a look at the ones that contain my user, I can have ones that contain gmail.com. Maybe my rule is wrong. We'll see. So here, yeah, I need to refresh that. If I want to create a new one, okay, fine. Apparently I messed with something. Yeah. Save order. Yeah, maybe it's doing it on save order instead. All right. Let me check. Yeah, it's on the sale order. That's funny. Forgot it was on the sale order instead of the lead. So there is no email from there. I need to go back here and change that instead. Okay, go back to the old view, old rule, user ID, false, and then do it rather on the leads. It's just next here. Yeah, we said email from I like, and here at gmail.com. Let's try this one. All right. Yeah. Back here. All right. Yeah, that's my other user. CRM. Create. This one is good. And if I say not salesperson is this one, if I remove it, then I cannot save. Well, it tells me read because it will try to read it as well. But you see that here there's an error. Why? Because simply it's not matching my rule. I removed the user ID, so that's why I cannot see it. And I didn't put the at gmail.com yet. So let's try now by putting test at gmail.com. Now this works. Why? Simply because my lead is matching one of the rules that I have here. Email from contains gmail.com, or my user, the user on the lead is myself. And you see here that I can remove this one. I can make the opposite test. If doesn't work. If I put my name, now it works. So that's really important. I did it here the following way by changing a domain, but usually we will ask you to create a new domain instead. That's the popular way to go. And managing those access rights and the rules, that's really important because it will help you give access or not to some specific people. All right. So maybe another thing I can mention about the groups is sometimes you may allow people to have some access to some buttons. And that is also managed in something particular that you don't see directly here, but that you will see in the views. And the views, always you have to be in technical mode. You go in the views here, and there, if you type groups in the architecture, you are going to see lots of views in Odoo that use that. Mostly, you can see mostly form views. If I group by type of views, you see, yeah, it's mostly about form views for 300, more than 300 views and 3 views. But let's have a look at form views that we all know, maybe on the REST partners. Yeah, good. And here there are a few things where we are going to say, in fact, yeah, this field will be only visible, the type, if you have access to the technical settings, but because that group is a group of technical settings. And so we have a few other occurrences, maybe here, yeah, another one where we say, hey, in fact, the field about the company, you can only see it if you have access to that group. And you're going to tell me, and you would be right, but man, that group, it doesn't exist. It's quite complex. Why do we have that name? In fact, it is not a name, it's an idea. So we are going maybe a bit too far here, but I think it's worth mentioning it as well when you want to work with the groups, is that the groups of Odoo, and I will open another window here, the groups of Odoo always have what we call external ID. So if I want to have a look at the name of the group multi-company, it's here. Once you are in debug, you can have a look at, always not only for the groups, but you can have a look at the external ID of any record. And here it's a view metadata. And I see that here, this is the name base group multi-company. And so if I want to translate this technical thing, it's saying, in fact, you have access to the company field, which is company ID, if you are part of that group. Okay. And so as I am part of that group right now, you can see it. Antoine is part of that group. As I'm part of that group, I will be able to have access to the company ID field on the partner view. Let's try it. Let's have a look. So I go in my CRM or in my contact, it would have been more or less the same. Customers. I will open the form view because we said it was on the form view. And there somewhere I don't remember where it is exactly. We have a company field somewhere that I have access to. Yeah, this one. And without the access to that group, I wouldn't be able to see it. Okay, and on the opposite, if I want to make this field available to everybody, the thing that I would need to do is rather to change the view and to delete that group notion so that everybody can see it. And that's the way we work. And even with Studio, in fact, if you want to change that, let's say that you want to change the visibility of one item. Let's go back in my leads here. Let's select this one. And let's say I want to make that email field available only to a specific set of groups, one group or several groups. I go in Studio, and then I'm going to say, hey, this field, in fact, I would like that it is only available here. And you see limit to visibility to groups. And that's exactly the same notion. Here you do it in a nice interface that is Studio, that I recommend you for your small modifications. But on the other side, it will create really something in the XML file. And so if I do this, it will link it to that group. And now it is done. So I will maybe have some pain to find back this information later. But that's how I did it. So now I need to be part of that group to be able to see that field. And so if I close here, I see hopefully I'm part of the group, so I can still see it. But it would be better for me to maybe make the field visible again for everybody, because it's not really something that I want to hide specifically. I mentioned the fields, but what is really important is that you can hide buttons as well. Buttons or those kind of smart buttons, it can be hidden as well, following the same way, through Studio or through view changes. And then here you will see me maybe change the modification I made here by going to the views and look for groups, again in the architecture, and I'm going to have a look at the one that was created by Studio. And here you see the change I made just right now. It's saying, okay, trying to remove the email field. So that it was not on it was on a CRM lead, sorry. Trying to remove the email field somewhere. Where was it? Yeah, that's one. Okay, so if I want to make it available for everybody again, I need to remove that, but that's maybe a bit too advanced. So I won't spend too much time on this today. It's more about view edition, while we have a software that does it, that is Odoo Studio, so it's maybe better not to talk too much about that. Okay, So let's continue a bit. Now I would like you to understand how Odoo manages that at the beginning, because I guess we agree that when you start Odoo, you go on our SaaS environment on Odoo SH, or you start your own first environment, you will see that in fact all those groups come every time you install an application. So you didn't have to create an inventory group manager or user. You didn't have to create all those groups. It came with Odoo. And in fact, Odoo creates that information. It creates that information when you install a module. And it's interesting to know, technically speaking, I will spend like 5 minutes on this, not more. It's interesting to know that it is contained in the groups. So if I go on our code base on Odoo, on GitHub, sorry, I go in the add-ons, I can have a look at, let's say, for example, no, not watch. All right. If I want to have a look at the seal module, all right, here we are. Under that seal module, we have something that we call security, and everything about the access rights and the groups and the rules is always contained in the security. And usually the access rights are here, and the groups and the rules are here. So let's have a look at those two files, and you see one is a CSV, what was in XML. If I go into the XML, you will see that we are going to have a look at the notion of user here. Let's find some information. Maybe the groups are created somewhere else. Group. Yeah, so here we are going to create, for example, in this module, we are going to create that group, which is another subgroup, that group as well. And so those groups, I didn't mention it because those are other specific groups, but those are again existing. We have it here. Yeah, that's a group that we have here. And so when you want to create a group in the code, we just simply put it in the XML here by saying, okay, there's an ID, which is the XML ID I mentioned. It is a group. Here's the name, and here's the category where it belongs. All right. And then after the groups, usually we start with the groups first, and then we mention the rules. Then you have all the rules, which are the ones that we saw. Let's say, do we have, yeah, personal quotation. You see the notion of personal stuff, personal orders. So that thing that is here is the one we played with just before. We're saying personal orders. That was exactly what I had. Let's go back on the rules, not the rules, but on the groups. If I look at the one about own documents only, here, rules, that was the one we had here. Personal orders. This one is really what we have here that we are loading. All right. And then, so that's for the rules, and usually the access rights on that side is here, where we have the name, we have the model on which we are working, and then we have simply read, write, create on link, and that is what we have here under the access rights. Okay, so that's important. You are going to create those access rights not only for one group here, which is the personal or own documents only group. You are going to do it for all the groups that are part of the sales application here, because we are in the sales application. So if you wish to build your own module, it is smart and I would say mandatory, and it's a good practice to always put your changes inside the security folder of your own application, as we do. And when I say as we do, lots of things, you should take some inspiration of what is already existing in Odoo. So keep the same structure here. Always have a security folder, sorry, and put your files inside for your access rights, for your record rules, and for the groups if you have to create new groups, of course. Okay, so we are not done yet. I think that we still have a few things to discover, like the notion of a multi-company access rights, because it's a really specific case, I would say. Let's go then into it. What is important is that we saw that we had a few rules here. Of course, every group has its own set of rules. But if I want to see all the rules, whatever the group, then there is a way you can do that. You can go here in debug mode and tap rules, and then you have lots of things about the rules. But the ones that are really interesting are the record rules. Those ones. Where here you have, you can see by default on my installation, I have something like more than 200 rules. So you see somehow. It's a lot, but not too much, knowing that the amount of applications I've installed at the moment. So it's quite okay, and most of it, and that's where I wanted to go. Most of it, if I type the notion of multi here, you will see that all those blue ones, all those things. So 61 rules here are part of what we call the multi-company rules. In fact, in Odoo, when you want to access documents, we saw that I could hide or show something that was related to some value in a field, okay, and that was some information I put in the rules. Well, that thing that I made, the small exercise I made on the leads, in fact, Odoo or developers found a way to do it everywhere on a field that we called company ID. And that company ID field is available on lots, many different models, records in Odoo, if you like. Just because when we think an item could be the property of one company or one other company, we are going to decide, okay, let's put a company ID field on that kind of record because we will need it later. And that, if you want to see it, maybe another way to see it is having a look at all the fields of Odoo and say, okay, company ID, where do I have fields named company ID? Well, I have, I have 135 different concepts where I have the notion of company ID. We have it on per shareholder, we have it on the budget, we have it on the vehicles in the fleet management module, we have it on the leaves for the people that want to take some holidays, we have it on the expenses. So you get my point, we have that everywhere. Every time you can have something where it is linked to one particular company or another one, then of course, what is really important is that you will have this notion of company ID. And that field, we saw it, and it's exactly the same that the one you saw under here, contacts, then on whatever the contact, you have that notion of sale purchase here, company was somewhere, yeah, here. So that's really the field. I can hover on it and so that you can see it, company ID. And so on our side, we are going to say, usually when you start and implement the multi-company application, which is also in itself an access right, it's not an application, it's wrong to say that, my bad. It's a setting. You are going to say, okay, I'm then going to enforce lots of different domains because of the multi-company thing that I want to put in place. I don't want by default people to see what's happening in another company, because if we have different companies, maybe they don't work with the same clients, or on the contrary, they do, and we don't want people to steal some clients from other companies and things like that. So you are going to be able to define what people can see when they are in one company and what they cannot see. And also, when you do that, you are going to explain if people can move from one company to another, but that's a user setting that you can find right here. Maybe I should show that too, because it's quite easy. That setting is right here, users, and you are going to go right there and say, okay, multi-companies, here's a list of companies I can access with my user. And you see I have quite a lot. If I go on the other side and have a look here at the second user, which is Henry Keegan, you can see that he has only access to 2 companies. So once you put all those companies, here I have 6, I'm saying, okay, Antoine has access to all the companies, or at least he can select among all those companies. But the funny thing is the following. When I'm connected with a person, if I go in my, let's say, in the accounting, if I'm part of default company right now, if I go to my vendor bills, do I have some? Yeah, I have a few. If I'm here, I see company is default company, but what if I switch? If I switch to another company, here, oh, I don't have any vendor bill on that company. And the fact that we show or we hide things is really related to those record rules. That's really important if you want to understand that. If you want to know and to configure it for your clients, it's really important to understand that because of those settings here, namely here it was on the invoices. So I can look for the object invoice. Yeah, that's really because of this rule that I cannot see it. Okay, otherwise I could change that rule too and say, okay, in fact, no, you can read it. So I think that just changing this would make me able to now, even though I'm in the Belgian company, should make me able to see the other invoices. But I don't want that, because otherwise it means that connected as Antoine, I'm part now. I said I'm going to work on the Belgian company, and the issue I have right now is saying that while I'm on the Belgian company, I could be creating invoices for another company. We don't want that. We want to have something that is clear, that is easy to use, and where people are not going to make mistakes. So I'm not even showing it. I want to make it not applied for read. So I'm changing that, and now if I refresh it, I have my walled garden, and nobody can see what is happening on the other side. All right. So on our side, we are not saying that we made the perfect default rules. I think those are good, really. But what we say is that if you want to change it, it's quite easy. It's quite easy to change, and it's quite easy to test. You have seen me switching from my user here to my administrator to make my tests, And that's how you should do it. It's, okay, I'm changing the domain. I'm having a look. It seems to work fine with my user, but I need to test also with all the users that could be impacted by my change. Not all the users, but all the different types of users. And once you are there, maybe it means that the rule that we set is correct and that you can save it. And maybe if you want to reuse it in other projects, put it in your own module. And that's I think very, very important. And you can see that if I remove the object invoice there, you have, in fact, most of the time it's always, nearly always the same notion of the same domain that is applied. It's always based on a company ID field that you have. Maybe in addition to what I could say here is that the domain is, I should explain a bit better the domain, which is, in fact, you have access to the information, so you can see a company if no company is set. So if I go on a, let's say on a customer right here, by default we say that if one customer in particular, sales and purchase, is not linked to a company, then it means that everybody can see it. If it's linked to only one company, it means that only that company can see it, and that's very important, and all the parent companies. And that's why you have the notion of child of that we use here. It means that once you are part of a company that is parent of the company that is set up here, you should be able to have access to that notion as well. And that's something that you want to change. And another question we sometimes have is, okay, I have 7 sisters companies, but I cannot base the value of my filter on just one company, because you see here I can only put one company. All right, every time it changes, I cannot put multiple companies. If that's your need, then you need to go through another field that would be a one-to-many or many-to-many, where you are going to verify to check the values inside. And if your need is saying, okay, it's not linked to one company, then it means the data model is wrong, and you need to add a company that links to sorry, I'll say again. You need to link it to a field that will link your record to multiple companies maybe, and then you check not only on one value but on multiple values, but that you have a few examples in there as well. So I think that's all for the rules and the multi-company thing. A very, very important thing, because I think at the same time I'm having a look at the question and I will come back there after. One thing that is really important is that we made an important change between version 11 and version 12 in terms of the notion of administrator of a database. I don't have any V11 just next to me, but I could go on the run bot. What is important to understand is that here, my first user, myself, if you like, if I click on the user, now you see here I have the ID 2. So it means I have been the second user to be created. And as such, in Odoo, it's not weird, it's just something that is a decision that we took. Is that now you are the ID 2, you are not the super admin. The super admin is somebody else. And that super admin is usually, since version 12, it's what we call Odoo bot. And if I click here, I think it will reload and show me Odoo bot, unless I don't have access to it. All right, so I should maybe do it differently. Go here, say remove internal users. Yeah, maybe I'm not part of the right company at the moment. Yeah, I'm part of Belgium, so I need to go back to default. And going back to default, you will see that I have some person that is here, that is called, I don't see it either here. All right. Then if I cannot show it, you will have to believe me. No, it's okay. We have a specific user that is called the Odoo bot, and that is ID 1. And that person has all the access to everything, whatever the information we have here on the applications, whatever the rules, it ignores that. And so you will have access to everything with that user, but it is hidden and inactivated, so you cannot connect with it. But if we come back to Odoo 11, the thing was slightly different because we didn't have that system user. The first user on Odoo 11, 10, 9, and every other version before that, version 12, was taking into account the fact that the first user had to be the admin. So it could be that if you are using a version prior to version 12, your user, by default, has access to everything. So we fixed that. It's not a bug, but it was something that was sometimes convenient, sometimes not. But we changed our mind, and we said, okay, it needs to be better now, and so that's why we came up with that notion of having that inactivated user here is Odoo bot. You see there are other inactive users like the public user, which is a kind of what we could call a visitor, but we'll come to this, I think, in another meeting. Okay, then I think we covered all I had to say. I will have a look at your question in a few seconds. Maybe the only other thing I need to tell you is really always to test that. Being on the SaaS environment or your own environment, it's really important to test the information you have, because you know that otherwise people will have access to some information they shouldn't have access to. And yeah, that's it. I guess that if after having a look at this video you still struggle to set up your access rights, maybe you can send a quick mail to our support or request for help. We have consultants that can help you. Yeah, basically that's it. I will have a look at a few questions, and I hope I will be able to answer time-wise and also with my knowledge. So I will try first. Okay, thanks for the heads up, guys. Dominic is asking, should we add the access right in CSV or through the graphical user interface? I won't say it doesn't matter. I say that if the access right you are creating is just for one project and you are in the production environment, or you don't have too much access right to create, you can do it from the GUI. It won't be too complicated, because you go, it's quite easy to change. You go into technical, you change or you create new access right or record rules, or you do it from the groups, which means it will lead to the same thing. So as I did by going to the sale, for example, right there, just use all documents, and while you are here, you are going to change or create new access rights or record rules, and that kind of things you can change. The thing is that I would be paying attention not to do it on the production environment and favor a duplicate environment where you would change a rule, test it, and if it works, bring it to the production environment. Now, if you need to change lots of different rules at the same time, it's better to embed it in a module. Do your changes, checking on Odoo SH, and then once your client or yourself, you agree that what you have been doing is good, you import it inside the real environment. So it's more like it's a mix of a matter of habits, of what is faster and what is better in terms of project management. It's not too much linked to Odoo, but it's much more linked to the way you work. And yeah, for a mid-size or important project, I would consider doing it in a module and in files that you can import. All right, so let's have a look at a few other questions. So Dominic K, it seems that when you modify the access right by GUI, when you upgrade a module, access right are reset to the original. It could be, yes, that's a very important point. It's not linked per se only to the access rights. It is about the very notion of the XML ID that we have and the definition of our modules. So in fact, in Odoo, I told you, let's take this one for example. You know that I've been sometimes here, I've been clicking on the view metadata, and here you have a notion of XML ID. And in fact, all those XML IDs are stored somewhere in a module that we created, at least the one that's come by default. Okay, so if I'm here, I want to have a look at the definition or where this is stored. I can check it on GitHub. All right, saying me it's here. It's available in 10 different XML modules. So my bad, I didn't pick maybe the right one. I guess it's here. Yeah, that's where we are going to create it. So you see here the group, salesman, that's where we create the group. And if I go there, let's find the information again. If I go there, I see that there is no notion of no updates. So indeed, Odoo will, if I refresh this module, Odoo will erase my changes. And that is something that is important based on the definition that we put by default. It could be that Odoo, when you upgrade, refresh the change, removes your changes, because we consider that this ID is our Odoo property by default, or default property if you like. And so if you change the definition of it, that is specifically for a rule, so in another file, if you change the definition of this, we will maybe change it back again when you upgrade. And that is important, and that's why I said during the exercise and when I was changing the access rights, that's why I said maybe don't do it like that. And one of the reasons why, of course, because otherwise Odoo during an upgrade could erase it. It's not really erase, it's more like override it, and that could change from module to module. So indeed, that's something you should pay attention to. In fact, I didn't see that Mr. Jacob Selinar replied, so thanks a lot. Edit on the fly, never full solution, correct. Demo instance, correct. Then the Flash, can you kindly demonstrate how you can prevent some users from seeing the sales application? Yes, there is a way you can do that. So we can test. I'm not against it. The first thing is that my first guess, because honestly I don't know yet, but we will see how we can find that information. The first thing I would do is saying, okay, that person, if he cannot see the sales application, what we should do is say, okay, in fact, no, it's not the good one. I should go on the second one. I should say, hey, you don't even have access to the sales application. I should do the following. Maybe subscription gives him access to it. That should be all right. Okay, so if I connect with him, was it here? Yeah. If I refresh, oops, it will give me an error because I'm having access to things I should be having access to. Yeah. No, you see, if I refresh, I still have access to the sales application. Why is that so? That must be because some other module is giving me access to what we call the menu item. That's something I didn't cover, so thanks for asking me. The menu item is also something that you have in the groups. In the groups, if I go back on my documents group, in the groups, what you have is that menu here. You are going to say which menu item do you have access to when you connect to Odoo. And here you see that apparently inside the sales application, I'm not saying that the sales application is the one that sees the sales module. So I need maybe to dive deeper and check if there is maybe some group that gives access to this little thing here. And usually you see that here in the technical, and then it's menu items. I go on sales. Yeah, of course I will have a lot. So sales here, that's the one you see here. That's also something like we can discuss today. Is the fact that all those menus in the menu items are all the menus that I have everywhere. All those ones at the top here. Okay, all those ones, but also all the first level menus that we have here on the splash screen. So this little icon is this one, and you can see it because it has a link to a web account file. And you can see here that in fact it's not linked to a group. And when you have something that is not linked to a group, it means that everyone can see it. So let's link it to another group, like something really specific, but no, let's say a document, own document only, because I think that my user is not even part of it. So now refreshing it, I guess it will disappear. So let's try this. Yeah, it disappeared. Simply because I'm saying that now, instead of being this item being available to everyone, I'm saying, okay, you need to be part of that group to have access to it. And so that's why here I don't have access to it, because I'm not part anymore of that group. Now, same change. If I'm saying, okay, users, Henry, if I go back and say, in fact, you are a sales manager, you should have access through inheritance to this menu item. Yeah, it's back. All right. Yeah. Dominic K, I think I explained for the multi-company, but you asked the question before, so don't hesitate to re-ask. Before user one was used to assign access to a newly created company. Indeed. Does related field automatically inherit the access rule of the original field? Nope. Related, well, it depends. You are talking about fields here. So the related field won't inherit the thing about the original field, but what is important is that if you have a related field on an object on which you have specific access rights, then the access right of that object will be used. So it could be that you see the field, but Odoo gives you an error message because you are trying to access some information you cannot see. But it's not because of the original field, it's because of the original value maybe contained in the field in case of a relationship between two different objects. So to me, that's it. I don't have any more questions. So that will be it for today. Don't hesitate to contact our support or to send us an email or to see with your account manager. Those are the kind of things that we can really quickly help you with. Of course, we're not going to configure, but if you have any question, of course, we would be glad to help. So that's it. I wish you a very good day. And let's see when we can organize another call, another meeting like this one, another webinar for further fun. See you guys.